All right, we are continuing with assignment 1. Last class, it was a work day on it. And digital honors, you're working on your black vector line art for your characters. I'm happy to help you know how to set that up. And then today is a big day for us because it's when our first assignment is due. So that is our fantasy landscape, assignment 1 for digital imaging and digital media. And then for digital honors, it is our aspirational deadline. It would be a really good deadline for our vector line art of our characters. This is our first assignment deadline. That's not an exercise, right? So the rubric for assignments, it's right here in our course outline. Just a reminder, turning in nothing by the deadline, having nothing in there with your name in the Canvas assignment means that you'll get 0 out of 3 for that, which is only 3% of the grade. But more importantly, it means you cannot resubmit. So even if you worked on it, if you didn't post anything by the deadline, even though you have work for it, that means you just get a 0 for it. You have to move on to the next assignment, right? So definitely turn in something by the deadline today, and that can just be your sketch, right? So that would be the first thing I would do today if you haven't already. If you turn in something that meets all the requirements, the bare requirements I call them, which for this assignment are a vision sketch and then a finished landscape composite. I'll put finished in quotes because we can always keep working on it. That's at least 8 by 10 inches by at least 300 pixels per inch. That uses at least 5 different references to build an original landscape. That is meeting the bare requirements. To make it engaging as art, to get 3 out of 3 points, we're going to try to make that as believable as possible, that everything looks like it's sitting in the same world with the same coloring, the same lighting effects. And we're going to get better and better at that as we go. So that's assignment 1. We're going to spend the first half of class working on that. So how do I get to the assignments? How do I shortcut to it? I can go right to the home page, go right to assignments. I don't have to go through Unit 4 again. We've already seen that. That's where Question of the Day 1 is contained. And I go to assignment 1. Now assignment 1 has underneath it on the assignments page some extra resources. Think of these as optional reading materials that will tell you a little bit about the professional practice of these skills. So I have a slideshow here, which is actually taken from combining some past students' final presentations. And these are artists that use compositing. One artist uses their own photographs to composite together into concept photographs for publication. Sometimes for ad campaigns. Got to be careful with music. The copyright of YouTube. And you can see how they're taken from multiple photos. The difference is this artist takes these photos themselves. They're kind of a landscape and wildlife photographer from Northern Europe, and then composites them together. Usually of like 20 or more layers. And you can see tutorials on how they do it. This one makes me think of Stranger Things. And then this artist does something a little different. It takes existing pixels from found high-resolution images online, just like what we are doing. But it uses way more than 5, and then it takes these different setting composites and makes kind of massive characters out of it, at least for some of the work, like this one. Or this one, which reminds me of One Piece, like the floating pirate cities. Now this can be up to 1,000 different layers, right? All composited believably together. This one I think is a really wonderful example. It's a Nature Conservancy commission, and it's all made with dried leaves and bark, right? To make this bird out of all these different layers that are warped and shaped and lit to make a new image. This is an elephant. Again, Nature Conservancy, all from glaciers and mountains. This is a seahorse, all out of plastic bags. Or not plastic bags. I think they're like rubber gloves. Yeah, plastic gloves, like surgical gloves. Here's the Queen of England, made up of all landmarks from London and from England. And then this is how the artist will do it. They will take their own photos when they need to, and then they'll obviously find images when they need to, right? But they are undoubtedly turning it into their own image, their own version, even though they're using other people's pixels. Whether it's for advertising, whether it's for fine art, whether it's for editorial work. So those are some resources, right? But let's go right to where we post our landscape. These are the requirements. Your sketch and then your composite. Your composite needs to be at least 8 by 10 inches by 300 pixels per inch. And we want to save it as a JPEG to put to Canvas and kind of limit it to be no larger than 5 megabytes. And then we'll kind of shrink it so it fits nicely in here. So what have I done so far? They've kind of changed things in Canvas so that the earliest posts go to the bottom. So I had my vision sketch. This was my optional kind of inspiration. And then I got these kind of components. And by the end of last class, I was able to stack them together. So let me find that project, open up my folder, hope it's organized, have my assignment 1 folder. It's the one I'm working on. I'm going to mark it yellow, mark exercise 2 as done. And I'm looking for my PSD. There it is. So how do I open it in Photoshop? Well, I would double click it to open it in Photoshop. I don't want to do that. I want to open it in Photo P. So I'm going to close a lot of these tabs I don't need. And instead, open a new tab for Photo P. And I'm not choosing to log in just to show you just direct way to use it. But if you do log into Photo P, it will have a memory of what you've done, device to device. But it's not reliable. We always want to save to our computer and to our thumb drives. And now, instead of opening it from here, because this is my flattened screen grab of my progress, I want to find my PSD image and open that in Photo P. So an easy way to do that is to just drag and drop it into the site. And then it will load it. And it will show me all my layers. All right, so this is where I finished up. So at this point, if there's any layer I don't need anymore, I can erase. Like I don't need my sketch floating on top of it. I got my sketch underneath. Then I'm going to turn off all the layers. Go ahead and rasterize this one. Yes. So you never will flatten it. Instead, you will save it as, export it as a JPEG. And by exporting it as a JPEG, JPEG is an online raster format that automatically flattens. Because Canvas won't take any file that's not flattened. It will only do it as an attachment. That's just how online interfaces work. So our online formats are JPEG and PNG so far. So I'm going to go to my furthest back layer. Underneath that is my sketch. The furthest thing back is this night sky. This is the only one I don't need to cut out because it's covering up my sketch. This is my next layer, and I want to blend this into this. Right? So that night sky can kind of look good on this mountain. So before I cut it out, you can see my rough cut there from last class. Before I cut it out really cleanly, I'm going to do something really important. And I've actually written them up on the whiteboard you'll see next to the notes. These are called direct image adjustments. You need to learn 3 of them this semester. They'll be on the final exam. We're going to use them a lot, but this is the introduction of them. These direct image adjustments will directly affect the pixels in the layer that you have selected. We are not doing it with clipping masks. We are not doing it with layer adjustments. We are directly affecting them. So what we do is we go to image, just like if we were going to check image size, which is always good to check. Make sure you're meeting the parameters of larger than 8 by 10 at 300 pixels per inch. But under image, we're going to go to adjustments. Notice we are doing it under image. We are not doing it under layer and adjustment layers. They're the same tools, but in a very different way. So we are doing them directly in image. So we go to image adjustments. The first one I need you to learn, think of these as 3 tools on your workbench. First tool looks like a hammer, right? And it's going to be levels. I could say it looks like a level, but I don't know how many of you know carpentry tools. So, levels. Levels is about lightness and darkness. It's not about color. So the first thing I do when I open up levels, and we've played with this a little bit when we were cleaning things for exercise 1, cleaning up black line art and getting like white and black. Here, instead of white and black, we want to play with what's called the midtone slider. And we want to just push it a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, and see which one better fits with what we're trying to match. Because I'm trying to match this night sky to this mountain, I'm going to be pushing it a little bit to the right. Not too far, never halfway or more, because then I lose pixel content. But about there. Then I'll show you what that does. And I say, okay. So in my history, I can undo it. There we go. And then I can redo it. And you can see it just darkens the midtones to help make it match. The next tool, let's say it looks like a saw, because this is my favorite tool, is image adjustments, color balance. Color balance is the temperature of the lighting. Right now we're indoors. We have yellow fluorescence. So everything in this room, I take your photo, everything's a little warm. It's like reds and yellows, not a lot of blues in your shadows. We're going to start again with midtones. Always safe to start with midtones. And this is very blue. This is also very blue. This has a little bit of yellow. This also has a little bit of yellow. There's not a whole lot to do with this color balance, except that this kind of bright blue, I might try to push back a little bit by pushing towards yellow and away from blue. I don't think I need to counter the magenta at all. Then I can go to shadows. Actually, I'll go to highlights next. Midtones, highlights, then shadows. And I might put a little bit more blue into those highlights. And it just depends how close or how disparate your references are, but this gives you full control. And then shadows. I'm going to push the shadows a little bit more blue. There we go. And it starts to look a little bit more like the evening. All right, so let's see what that did. So that was the levels I used. Now this is the color balance. God, almost nothing. So it must be pretty close. But at least you have the control of it there. Just because it didn't need it. Then the last tool, this one is kind of the one you don't need all the time. So what's a tool you don't need all the time? We used a hammer, use it all the time. Saw, used it all the time. Tool we don't use all the time, a protractor, right? But when you need it, you need it. So it's called hue saturation. So there's only 3 tools I need you to know from this whole list. Levels, color balance, hue saturation. And you want to do it in that order. And this is the same order they're shown in Photoshop. So image adjustments. Hue saturation is this protractor. What it's nice for is really changing the whole spectrum of the color. Now you don't want to do it too much or you just get monochrome. But if you do it a little bit from the middle, you can see if you need to push it more warm or more cool on the spectrum. And I'm actually going to push mine a little bit towards the warm. And then the next big thing is saturation. Saturation is the intensity of color. And I'm actually going to take the saturation down a little bit. If you take it down all the way, you lose all your color. But if I want to make it look a little bit darker, I take it down. Now, I can repeat those as needed. So the tools were hammer, saw, protractor, levels, color balance, hue saturation. I need to go back to my hammer, my levels, and just darken it a little bit more. And maybe limit my highlights with this bottom slider. Now that's really looking like it's under a night sky. So that's going to help when I actually cut it out. So now I'm ready to start blending and cutting out. It all depends on your reference. If this was a night sky and this was a night sky, I wouldn't